Help support the show by going to the Amazon.com search bar on footballsamerica.com when doing your online shopping. There are no charges to you, just support, and it will take you right back to the Amazon website. This month, Football's America podcast listeners will get free shipping on any order over $35 when they go to footballsamerica.com/Amazon. Again, that's footballsamerica.com/Amazon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Football is America with Ron and Kyle. I'm Ron, and Kyle can't join us today because he's sick at home and crying like a baby, and he's a whiner. So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce Seth Keysor, one of the fantastic editors from ArrowheadPride.com, which is the Chiefs SB Nation team and blog page, and we have Seth here to discuss the team with us today. Seth, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, I'm just happy to be here, man. How's it going?
It's going good. And yourself?
Oh, it's going fantastic. Living the dream, man.
How's the weather there right now?
It's Minnesota. It's cold. That's
Well, I saw it was 81 degrees in Chicago yesterday.
Yeah, you know, we miss all of that. Basically what happens is the weather patterns essentially like jump over Minnesota and just keep it cold. That's essentially what they do here. It's a rough gig, but what are you going to do? At least we've got mosquitoes that are the size of birds, so.
Yeah, if Kyle were here, he'd tell you the same thing about Alaska. I'm actually from central Iowa, believe it or not, and I have a lot of friends up in the Mason City area, so I'm sure you know kind of where that general area is.
Yes.
And that's kind of where I went to school and stuff up there. So I know exactly what you're talking about, how the weather just kind of seems to pass that entire area over. So.
Well, only the nice weather. The horrifying weather always just like lingers for a day or two, so it's good times.
So let's get into a little bit about you. How long have you been a fan of the Chiefs?
I became a fan of the Chiefs. It was back in '92, I believe it was, when Joe Montana took the Chiefs down the field to come back against the Broncos on Monday Night Football. I became a fan that night, and I was 7 years old, and I've just been obsessed ever since. It's a real problem.
So no family affiliation or anything like that?
No, my dad's a tortured Vikings fan. We were living down in Kansas City at the time for just a couple of years, and so that was the only game we could watch. I just remember watching Joe Montana and Marcus Allen, Kim Landers, all of them, and I was just hooked. And by the time we got back to Minnesota, it was too late for me to become a Vikings fan so I dodged that bullet, fortunately.
I can kind of hear that little bit of Minnesota in your voice, too.
Yeah, I'm told that my accent sometimes gets a little strong.
So that's interesting. Like, most people you talk to, you know, my grandpa was a fan, and it's generations. It's in my blood. I was born this, and I've been this for 27 years, and like that's the way to go. I'm actually a Bears fan, so I feel bad and share the pain that your dad shares with hating the Packers. So
yeah, there you go. We can all unite as one in that at least.
All right. So what kind of drove you to be a writer and a pro? I mean, we were talking a little bit before the show, and you brought up that you're now really in with Arrowhead Pride. Kind of give us, you know, the rundown of your history there and what kind of caused you to get to where you're at now.
Well, what essentially happened is I spent a lot of time on like ESPN chat boards and that kind of thing, trying to find a place to talk Chiefs with people, because I was up in Minnesota, not a lot of Chiefs fans up here. And late in 2009, I stumbled across Arrowhead Pride, which it was just a fantastic site. It had really great contributors, had a lot of in-depth information, and at the time already had a lot of traffic, a lot of commenters. There was a lot of people that would talk, and so I joined the site. And, you know, you can write fan posts there and that kind of thing, do your own little articles that, you know, they'll publish for you. And after I'd been doing that for about 6 months, a contributorship opened up at Arrowhead Pride. I emailed them. They took me on, and I contributed for about 2.5, 3 years. And while that happened, well, for whatever reason, I really enjoyed it, and I couldn't get enough of it. I kept just kind of devouring the game. I kept talking to anyone I could to learn as much as I could, watching as much film as I could. And, you know, the more you write and the more you learn, the better you get at this thing. And finally, eventually, about a year ago. They were kind enough to offer me a paycheck to stick around, and it's a great site. I love it. So now I kind of focus on film review and just basically general, well, almost anything I want. I actually have a mailbag that I do about once a week, where the last time I think I spent like 1,000 words on a Walking Dead question. So I mean, I write about basically whatever my editor allows me to, and he's pretty cool about letting me write whatever I want.
That's outstanding. That's the telltale signs of a good editor there, that just kind of lets you roll and do whatever. Right. And we were talking before the show. You said that your screen tag name had kind of been a point of contention with some of your fans and stuff. Can you kind of give us some insight into that?
So my screen name or my pseudonym or whatever is Minnesota Chiefs fan, just a capital M, capital N, Chiefs fan. And so I wrote under that. That was, what I put down when I joined up with Arrowhead Pride just as a user. And that's what I continued to use when I was a contributor. Well, as I kind of picked up a couple more followers on Twitter and started to kind of do it a little more seriously, I talked to Joel, my editor, and asked him about just switching over to my real name like a grown-up. And he said fine, and I switched over. And the very first article I wrote, like 3/4 of the comments weren't even about the article. They were about, who is this guy? What are you doing? Why would you switch over from here? And I was surprised. So I didn't think people would be that upset about it. And I mean, I know my name isn't the greatest, but it was hurtful. But anyway, after a couple more articles, people kept just, making comments were always like, Minnesota Chiefs fan would have never written this. So,
it's like you're a completely separate person. Like, like you split and you killed the other one. And
exactly. I tried to eat him and take all his power, and so finally it just was enough of a thing where I was like, you know what? If people like the pseudonym thing, it kind of became like almost a meme on Arrowhead Pride. Like people would just, they called it giving people the Minnesota Chiefs fan treatment. It became a whole thing. It became a verb somehow. I don't know. And so I just went to Joel and I said, you know what? This is taking up an inordinate amount of my time. So let's just switch me back, because this is getting ridiculous. And so went back to Minnesota Chiefs fan, and I actually had someone set up a fake Twitter account for Minnesota Chiefs fan. And so I had to do a Twitter account with a different name, just real Minnesota Chiefs fan. So the pseudonym got, you're kind of, sort of, almost famous when someone sets up a fake Twitter account in your name. That was one of the weirder things that's happened to me since I started doing this. But yeah, so that was the whole deal with that. It was a mess.
Now, you're also a proud father of 4, married as well.
I got 3 boys and a girl.
Oh, wow. That's impressive. So, what is your...
I tried. It was...
Well, you're doing it right somehow, right?
All right.
So, since becoming a Chiefs fan, you said you kind of became that Chiefs fan with the whole Joe Montana thing, and that was kind of at the tail end of his career. So can you kind of go look back through all of the years, give us your strongest memory, good or bad, of the Chiefs?
Oh, man. Well, the strongest memory for every Chiefs fan in my generation is they're almost all bad. I mean, and they almost all involve the Colts in some way, shape, or form.
Oh, well, then you better be glad that Kyle's not here, because Kyle is a huge Colts fan. Like,
well, so he'd already be asking me about 38-10. And,
oh yeah, he'd be railing you right now. Like it wouldn't even be close. Like
I'd have hung up by now and just said I can't do this. No, probably the 2 strongest memories that are negative. The first one would be obviously the playoff game against the Colts. The Chiefs had a 13-3 team. They decided to sit Rich Gannon, because why would you want your best quarterback to play? And then they lost to a Colts team that they were massively better than, and Lynn Elliott missed a field goal. You see, now I'm getting emotional even just thinking about it. It's awful. And Lynn Elliott is actually referred to on Arrowhead Pride as the kicker who shall not be named, and people actually get flagged for saying his name. But I mean, so there's that, and then honestly, it's a pretty recent memory as far as a negative one, but that 38-10 playoff comeback was just, I've never seen anything like that. And it was so bad that it almost became funny at a certain point. That last long touchdown pass to T.Y. Hilton, I started laughing. because, what can you do at a certain point?
Yeah, I've been a Bears fan for my entire life, so there's been a lot of laughing in losses on my side too. So I know exactly how you feel.
Right. You have to just laugh eventually. As far as a good memory goes, it would probably be watching that 2002, 2003 Chiefs offensive line, blocked for Priest Holmes. That I will fight anyone to the death over whether that was the greatest offensive line ever assembled. And I'll go back and I'll watch Priest Holmes highlights just to watch the blocking because I'm a football nerd and it's amazing stuff.
All right. Well, we've actually got to go on to the actual Chiefs stuff. We could say I could pick your brain, and I could talk, about everything that you do and everything all day long. But our fans are listening to this and going, "Oh, are they going to ever talk about the actual Chiefs? So is this guy just going to gloat about himself for an hour?" And so let's go ahead and go on to the 2014 season.
Right.
As it seems for many teams, it was up and down. Coming out of the gate, the team loses to the Titans. Not a great start. Then a loss to the division rival Denver, which was expected, but the critics of Andy Reid and Alex Smith were starting to kind of circle overhead.
Right.
The warm trip to Miami seemed to be the cure with a stomping of the Dolphins.
Right.
The next week, though, and this is Kyle's personal favorite, you guys laid a smackdown on New England, and that one that had never been done to Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Right. Actually forcing him to sit Brady on the bench. Kyle loved watching Tom Brady reach for his Uggs and weep the sweet tears of sadness into them. That seemed to be a kickstart of a great run where you guys won 5 out of your next 6. But then things kind of sputtered out at the end, though, and you had a tough loss to the Raiders, which Kyle and I believe was one of the best games last year. That was mixed in there, right. But you still had a respectable 3-3 division record. Looking back on the season now, can you tell us if you thought the season was a success? And if not, what were the small successes that the fans can look at and say, okay, that's something we can build upon?
Right. I got to give you the lawyer answer of it depends. I would call it a success in that it was an exponentially more difficult schedule than the Chiefs played last year or in 2013. And they managed to be competitive in every game they played. They played a ton of really, really good teams this year. And it was successful in that, they managed to acquit themselves pretty well. A big problem of what happened is they lost some of their most important defensive players early on, and down the stretch you could just see it taking its effect. I wouldn't call it a successful season. I'd call it a fun season. Anytime you don't even make the playoffs, it's tough to call it successful. But yeah, it was that's the it depends answer. If you want to view it with a homer's view, it was fun to watch, but it wasn't necessarily that successful. If you want to look to the solid points, they were the only team in the league to beat both Seattle and New England, which technically I think means they're the actual Super Bowl champions. So that's
is that what you're taking away?
Yeah, that's what I'm taking away from the 2014 season. Obviously those types of games. I was actually at the Seattle game. Those games were kind of the high watermark of the season. It kind of showed that they went forward from a team last year that was ready to maybe make a little bit of noise. This year they showed that even though they were up and down, they could compete with very, very, very good teams and beat very, very good teams. And so that would be the positive point you take moving into next year. It's like, well, okay, now it's time to take the next step forward and actually beat good and bad teams.
And it's funny because when we look back on their season, when they were on that 5-game run that they had there, it was amazing to watch. They were competitive games. You had that one tough loss to San Francisco, but those other 5 games, I was just really impressed. One, because it's the Chiefs and they don't get nearly enough recognition. And I talk about that all the time on the show about how a lot of the, more main media members talk about how the Chiefs are boring and it's like watching molasses and stuff like that. And it's really just because the exposure is not there. And then also because Andy Reid wasn't really known for going on long winning streaks. And so that was what impressed me kind of the most about it. So talking about Andy Reid and also his boss, John Dorsey, they're in their 3rd year with the Chiefs.
Right.
Lots of moving pieces at work here.
Yes.
We're going to go into the personnel stuff here in a few minutes, but first, what is the general opinion of him and his staff? And given the division that they play in, what was the expectation of them last year? And are they on the hot seat at all with higher expectations this year?
There's always going to be a subset of fans to where almost everyone's on the hot seat. The vast majority of Chiefs fans that I interact with are very happy with Andy Reid, especially. He's done a fantastic job we'll talk about personnel shortly, but considering the available personnel and some things that have gone on, he's done a fantastic job shaping a competent offense. As far as John Dorsey goes, there's a lot of happiness with how he's handled undrafted free agents. Some of what he's done in free agency, there's a lot of dissatisfaction with how he's handled, first round draft picks. Eric Fisher hasn't done much. D Ford barely got on the field last year. They're not though on the hot seat at all. The vast majority of Chiefs fans are very happy, especially after the fiasco we just came out of with Scott Pioli and Todd Haley and Romeo Crennel, and their fans are very happy with them, but they are expecting this third year. That's when the plan's kind of supposed to take effect. So the seat could get pretty warm if there's not an improvement from 2014.
All right. So what are the biggest concerns going into next year? We can talk a lot of the personnel stuff. I would have to guess that the cap is probably a big concerning point. I mean, you are now the lowest in the league, $3 million. Right. I'm guessing a lot of that has to do with the franchise tag on Justin Houston. But Can you give us any insight in how they plan on managing the cap in order to get some of the last remaining pieces they need to make this team, the division winner and possibly and hopefully a playoff run?
Absolutely. It's kind of interesting. The cap issue, that's something that people talk about a lot. The thing about salary cap is you can't just view it in the year that you're in. You have to look, okay, so right now we're barely below the cap, barely enough to sign draft picks, fair enough. But what does 2016, 2017, 2018 look like? And as far as that goes, the Chiefs are actually doing much better than people think they are with cap room. In 2016, they're slated, if you look at over the cap salary cap calculator, which is the greatest tool in the history of humanity, they're actually slated to have just a shade under $60 million in cap room as things stand next season.
That's outstanding.
Yeah, and a lot of teams do have that kind of room. But what you have to look at, if you look at, say, for example, last season the Saints had no salary cap room, right? And then they somehow signed Jarius Byrd, which was a disaster because he got hurt. And
it was a bad contract at that, too.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it was. They were kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, pushing stuff down the road. So on one hand, you want to be careful not to go full Jerry Jones and just kick things too far down the road. But on the other hand, when you look at the cap, you have to look at the next couple of years and realize the salary cap's just going to keep going up because the NFL is going to keep making a ton of money. And then additionally, you have to look at who you have signed through 2016 to 2017 and that kind of thing. And the Chiefs are actually sitting pretty good in those future years, which is why they were able to trade for Ben Grubbs and then restructure his contract and that kind of thing. So the cap is a concern for this year if they really want to compete this year, if they want to add any more pieces. But moving forward, it's actually not that big a concern. The only real issue they might have is re-signing guys like a Dontari Poe and then obviously Justin Houston.
Right. I mean, you look at the way that teams handle the whole cap situation. You constantly hear about, they converted this part of his contract into cash or signing bonus or whatever to pay that out to clear cap space. I mean, we saw the Texans sign J.J. Watt to that huge contract, and almost immediately they were like, we converted $60 million to signing bonus, and now that none of that matters. So now his actual cap hit is only $6 million as opposed to the $14 million that it would have been, and so. You see that kind of thing all the time, and I that's when people don't really realize that cap is really relative to the situation, to be honest.
It is, and that's where the site I referenced, Over the Cap. I don't know if you've played around with it at all. They've got a salary cap calculator that you can play with.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's a really great tool to kind of make you understand just how much flexibility there is. If you get the right players, and this is a very careful statement with it because you got to be careful with it. You can pay people almost whatever you want if it's the right players. Now, if they bust, obviously you really hindered yourself before like a Hainsworth type thing. But if he is a very solid player, you're not going to hurt yourself too much paying him if you're not stupid about how you structure the contract. And you can see that playing with the calculator.
Right. Yeah. You look at like stuff like what the Bears did with Jay Cutler and how they're on the hook for all that money because they weren't smart about it. They gave him all that money on basically unproven talent. And now
I'm so sorry about that, by the way.
You know what? It's being a Bears fan. That's what that is. That's exactly the definition of being a Bears fan.
And there's a little bit of frustration with Chiefs fans about Alex Smith's contract, which isn't nearly as prohibitive as Cutler's, but it was still more than people wanted to pay, and people get frustrated about that.
Well, the way you have to look at it is when you're talking contracts, especially when it comes to Alex Smith, and I think that he's kind of an underrated guy. I don't think he's super duper talented. He's no Tom Brady, no Peyton Manning or anything like that. Right. But when it comes to the system that he plays in, he is a very efficient quarterback and a very, very, I would say if we're talking game managers here, he is top of the game manager class, right at the bottom of next tier quarterback. So. Right. When people are like, oh, he made too much money, I'm like, he didn't even make as much money as Andy Dalton, and look at what Andy Dalton does.
Yeah, Alex Smith is a really unique quarterback, and I'll keep this brief because this could be the Alex Smith podcast. He's a really unique quarterback in that his strengths and weaknesses are just flat out different from most quarterbacks. If I actually, for one article that ended up just being a monster, I went back and I tracked literally every drop back Smith had on all 22 film. And I tracked how many missed shots he had downfield where he had an open receiver. I tracked potential interceptions that he threw, stuff like that. His strengths and weaknesses just don't match up with what people expect from a quarterback. He throws a potential interception once like every 50 throws, and the average in the NFL is like once in every like 20. He's an exceptionally careful quarterback. But people don't value that, They want people that chuck it down the field. And so that's why he frustrates people so much. His strengths and weaknesses don't match up with what people really would like to see.
Right. When you have a team that, like the Chiefs, who their strength is running the football. If you can, I don't understand that from some fans sometimes. If I could have my team go out there and only ever run the football and score every single possession, why would you ever want to take the risk of throwing it?
Absolutely.
The point of throwing is because you couldn't get there with running. You got to third down and you're too far away to run the football. Like That's the entire point of throwing the football. And maybe that's a very dated way of thinking, but like that's the reality. I help coach a football team.
Right.
We don't throw unless either A, we think we have an advantage over somebody big time. Right. Or B, it's an absolute necessity. So people just don't value that aspect of the game enough. So I get where you're coming from with Alex Smith, but we need to go on to a couple of the other personnel moves that the Chiefs have made. And some of them are, kind of out there, but let's go into one of the real positive ones, which I think is the huge heisting that you got from the Saints for Ben Grubbs.
Oh, that was fantastic. People were very, very excited about that. The Chiefs' left guard position last year was played by a guy named Mike McGlynn, and it's very rare that you'll see an offensive guard play such a key role. But offensive line is kind of one of those things where it doesn't, one stud doesn't make an offensive line great, but one terrible player can just destroy an entire game plan. And you talked about that 3-game loss stretch to Oakland, Denver, and Arizona down the stretch. If you go back and watch the tape of those games, you see the left guard position. If you had plugged in an average left guard into those games, they had a shot. Teams were scheming specifically to go after one position on the offensive line. It was ugly. So Ben Grubbs, he obviously is a massive upgrade, and he addressed what was literally the biggest weakness on the team. People talk about wide receiver and stuff, but the offensive left guard was the worst. It was the worst I've seen an NFL player play. And, not to throw Mike McGlynn under the bus, but it was awful. It was that bad.
Well, a spade's a spade. You can't sugarcoat anything. There's when we're talking about somebody's play, it's not personal. It's just fact. It's skills. Like I didn't have the skills to go into the NFL. I barely had enough skills to put my shoes on. So but that's just fact. So talking wide receivers though, you just brought that up about how everybody thinks that that's the biggest concern for the Chiefs. You did end up getting Jeremy Maclin. Right. And he returns back to daddy in KC from Philadelphia. And I'm guessing he's got to be happy about that.
He seems happy. He's dove right in and been like participating in charity events and kind of doing the, just kind of becoming part of Kansas City very quickly. He obviously gets that stuff. He is just overall, because obviously with Maclin in, Dwayne Bowe went out. Maclin overall is just a significantly better fit in Andy Reid's offense and with Alex Smith as a quarterback than Bowe ever was. He's got to be, he seems thrilled. I think he liked it in Philly, but Chip Kelly seems to believe that you don't need NFL caliber players for the most part. And you can just, your system will save you. So, he obviously wasn't going to fork over the money for Maclin, But that was a big get. Macklin is probably the player, besides even more so than Ben Grubbs, that everyone's by far the most excited about.
Yeah, just when you look at his skill set, it seems to fit so perfectly with that Andy Reid offense. But I mean, one of the things, and we'll get to this a little bit later, is his injury history and just his ability to stay healthy in that offense. Now, staying on the wide receiver track, Dwayne Bowe, he's gone, and what I perceive as the torment of Chiefs fans is finally over. Can you kind of dive into that and kind of tell us, like, is this something that all the fans are really happy about? Are you happy about it? I mean, is everybody elated that, he's finally gone and you guys shipped him to a team that is never going to be good ever?
Honestly, Dwayne Bowe is pretty beloved by Chiefs fans. He was the only fun thing to watch on that team for about 3 years. He was, besides maybe, Tony Gonzalez before he left. He's a frustrating receiver to watch, because he's got all the talent in the world. In the first half against the Patriots game, when they just curb stomped the Pats, he just destroyed Revis time after time after time. But then, and this has been his whole, when Asamuga was an amazing, or Asamoah, however you say his name, never could figure that out. He would destroy him, and then the next week a no-name corner would completely shut him down. And so on that level, Chiefs fans are really happy, because they were paying elite receiver money for a guy that was only elite for, a couple stretches of downs a game. And so we're happy about that. Honestly, I was hoping he'd go somewhere where he was a better fit scheme-wise and maybe get a ring, but he picked the Browns, which is just kind of the opposite direction. I don't know.
Well, his attitude seemed to kind of always be money over
right.
wins in that sense. I mean, he always kind of came across as arrogant, selfish, and kind of a jerk and a child, petulant child at that sometimes. And yeah. I'm not saying that his talent isn't there, because you have to be talented to get 1,000 yards a season repeatedly, but it just seemed like he just didn't care about the Chiefs like Tamba Ali cares about the Chiefs and stuff. Like that's a guy who really loves his team, and Dwayne Bowe just didn't seem to have it.
Right. And, and he said all the right things usually, but, at the end of the day, what you mentioned, Tamba Ali, what happened with Tamba Ali is he took a pay cut. Like, you almost never see people take like a legit actual pay cut in the NFL. They just kind of move the money around. He actually took a pay cut to stay in Kansas City. And rumors have been, just floating around various places on that he was considering retiring if he couldn't make it work with the Chiefs. He loves the Chiefs, and the fans obviously respond to that. Whereas with Bowe, kind of the pointing to his name on his jersey every time he got a first down, people get tired of that unless you are like a superstar, and he wasn't. So,
well, he reminds me a lot of like Chad Johnson. Just he didn't run his mouth as much, but just his play on the field and his actions on the field kind of, he kind of gave the impression like he believes that he is the best and God's gift to football and stuff. And I find that very aggravating. I mean, you don't have to be ultra humble, but I mean, come on.
Right.
So,
no, and you can get away with that when you're when you're elite. People will put up with it. When you're not playing at an elite level and you're, like whatever it was, 30th in the NFL in yards, or even worse, I mean, people aren't going to put up with it. And obviously they weren't going to pay him $14 million for middle of the pack production.
Right. Let's go into somebody who is not considered elite, but I believe is highly underrated, and that is because of an injury he received last year. But you guys got him, and that's Tyvon Branch.
Yes.
I think it's a really great signing. There's a lot of people who don't think so. They think that this is way too much of a risk. He can't stay healthy. He's had injury problems. If this guy can't stay healthy, in my opinion, he's going to be the best safety that anybody got in the offseason this year.
I absolutely agree. Branch, when he's healthy, he's a very, 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 very good safety. He tackles well. He does everything. He plays in the box, but he's got like 4.35 speed. I mean, he's a fantastic player. But yeah, it's the health issue. And injury history, it just depends on the player, because you've got some players. Jamal Charles was injury prone, and now he plays tons of snaps every year. You just don't know what's going to happen. Travis Kelce was injury prone. He played a ton of snaps last year. You just don't know. Injury history is more fans believing that something that is mostly random is somehow, because of their rabbit's foot or whatever. It's kind of a myth that we've we tend to buy into because it makes sense to us. And then every time we see a player get injured again, we confirmation bias kicks in. We say, see, he's injury prone, but that's mostly a myth. Branch might get hurt. He might not. But if he does, I agree with you. He's going to be an incredible signing. Bob Sutton loves to run 3 safety defensive sets. And they've got Hussein Abdullah and they've got Ron Parker, and Tyvon Branch, I think, would be by far the best out of those 3 players if he's healthy.
What a lot of people don't consider, and especially fans, is that it isn't the amount of injuries that makes somebody injury prone. I mean, if somebody's always injured, yes, they're injury prone, but it's also what the injury is. Yeah. A sprained knee is not the same as being injury prone with constantly tearing ACLs like your Sam Bradford.
Right, absolutely.
Right. Sam Bradford is injury prone. Having one horrible injury and then taking a couple of seasons to come back from that is not injury prone. It is recovery. There's a difference. When you look at Peyton Manning.
Right.
I mean, the guy came back and took a team to the Super Bowl after basically kind of being, in recovery for almost 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
You can look at that however you want. Let's go into the re-signing of Ron Parker, because you just brought him up and you're saying, that they have him there, and not much is known about him. He's a former Raider, former Seahawk, a very young guy. Can you kind of give us some insight into what his role is going to be and who he is, to be honest? Because outside of Wikipedia, there's really not much about him.
Absolutely. Ron Parker, up until last season, he spent most of his time at cornerback. He is not a good cornerback. He is actually really bad corner. However, basically injuries forced them to plug him in at single high deep safety. And suddenly it was like a light bulb switched, and he was just knocking down deep passes left and right. He's got incredible speed, and he's got really good ball instincts. But he's got horrible mirroring ability, mirroring a wide receiver through the routes. He can't do it. He plays really great on the ball, plays really horrible on the man. So he's a really great fit at deep safety. He played
great zone player, terrible man-up player.
Absolutely, and he's also, his tackling is it's like it's as if someone threw a glass of water on the runner as he's trying to go by Parker. I mean, it just doesn't do a whole lot. He's a really great fit, like you said, for a zone, for playing deep there, knocking down deep passes, cutting off part of the field to where the quarterback doesn't look there. His contract on the face of things was a pretty sizable one, but I can actually say very confidently he was one of the people I've looked at on all 22 and reviewed his snaps. He played really, really well at free safety and just god awful at corner. And so you've got a lot of Chiefs fans that are just like, just please, for the love of God, don't put him at corner anymore and we'll be fine. So I think he's going to be taking probably very nearly every snap this season. He's got a lot of strengths that fit free safety well, and a lot of his contract is incentive laden. And so he could potentially, we could be looking a year down the road and thinking, wow, that was a great signing. I know Matt Bowen loves him too. And anytime Matt Bowen loves anyone, I tend to agree because he knows so much more about the game of football than I do.
Having a safety that had also played corner, whether good or bad at that position, is a godsend in my mind, because it gives them such a grand perspective of what they need to be able to do. When you look back at like a lot of the safeties that switched from corner, and the big one, obviously, Charles Woodson.
Sure.
When you look at how he went from kind of the receiver coverage guy to being, more of a deep safety, and he also plays in the box too, but it just seems like they can convert much easier.
Sure.
And then they also have just a completely different view of the game. It is definitely a advantage that most safeties that are just coming out of college don't have.
Absolutely.
Also, Anthony Fasano, Donnie Avery.
Right.
They are let go. And I wasn't too surprised about the Donnie Avery, but like these two guys kind of seemed like they were and they weren't great players, but they were staples. They were guys that had been through the thick and the thin with the Chiefs over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
Fasano especially.
Especially, yes.
We really liked Fasano. I think it's just he's very relentless despite his age, and I don't think that he ever really got the recognition he needed, because on top of being a very great receiver, deceptively, I guess is the best way to put it, at the tight end position, he was also a great run blocker. And so I was surprised to see them let him walk as well.
Absolutely. Well, to handle them one at a time, what happened with Avery is he just struggled with injuries a lot in 2014. He was in and out. And while he was out, Albert Wilson, who was an undrafted guy out of, why am I not remembering this? I think it was K-State. He came in and played pretty well, like surprisingly well for an undrafted guy. He showed the ability to stretch the field. He showed a lot of ability after the catch, and he played really well at that wide receiver 2 position. Up until then, no one had challenged Avery at all because, you got just a bunch of no names that couldn't play, to be perfectly blunt. Well, when you're struggling with injuries and then you have a dirt cheap guy come in and play well at your position and you're supposed to get paid $4 million the next year, that doesn't bode well for your future. As far as Fasano goes, what ended up happening, and I think a lot of people saw it on like that Monday night game, this last season was kind of Travis Kelce's coming out party in a sense. Kelce is just a lot more talented than Fasano. Fasano's steady, but Kelce's explosive.
Exciting, yeah. Exciting to watch.
He's insanely fast and insanely good after the catch. And he's also just a vicious run blocker. There's a great gif out there of him flattening Earl Thomas. That is one of the most fun things I've watched. They've got Jim Ross commentating over, good God, he's killed him. And it's a fantastic gif. And so, Fasano just gradually lost his starting role. And he's making a decent amount of money to be the number 2 tight end. He's like you said, he's a sneaky good receiver. He knows where to go, even though he's very slow. He knows where to go to get open on the field. He's got steady hands. He's a good run blocker. He's going to help whatever team, and maybe he ends up with the Bills. I know he had visited them, but whatever team he goes to, he can help a team. But it was just a matter of they had someone to start that they really like, whose ceiling is exponentially higher. And so that seems to be the reason they went that direction. It was a cost-cutting move. And, as they're trying to fit the pieces, to maybe sign Houston long-term and pay for Alex Smith's contract, pay for Jamal Charles' new contract and stuff, they seem to be trying to, every non-essential guy is going to kind of get treated like that, it seems.
Yeah, I'm just now watching that GIF of Kelce flattening Earl Thomas. That's ridiculous. Well, I think it caught him a little off guard. I don't think he was expecting him to be able to put the move on him that hard,
Right. Well, no, you could tell he just closed the distance a little faster. And Kelce, keep an eye on him this upcoming year. He actually did an interview recently where he said he never felt right all year. He was still coming off an injury from last season. And he's his college tape is crazy impressive too. He is just he's a specimen. He's a really good, really vicious run blocker. He's going to be something, provided he stays healthy. The usual caveat. But I just think Fasano had to clear the way for him, much like Earl Thomas should have just cleared the way for him.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about Justin Houston. You brought him up saying they need to be able to pay for his contract.
Right.
Let's go ahead. This is kind of the last piece of the personnel segment here. Let's go over his franchise tag talks. And definitely a guy you wouldn't want to lose. I mean, someone of that caliber, it's just not somebody you let go without a big time fight.
Right.
He does seem a little disgruntled about the tag. So he said a couple of different things. One of them being that he won't play on the franchise tag, stuff like that. He wants the contract. Right. Is this a guy who gives the appearance, media aside, because the media likes to spin things all the time?
Sure.
Is this the kind of guy that would take a little bit less money to make the Chiefs a Super Bowl team? Or is this somebody who's, I want my money, I want it now, and I'm not going to play without it?
Right. It's, obviously, not knowing the guy, it's tough to say. His agent is well known for being hardcore. Like, Houston was one of the last people to sign after the new rookie CBA went through, because his agent insisted that he waited until absolutely everything was in place. His agent was trying to fight on the defensive end versus outside linebacker thing. His agent is just well known for being kind of a pain, honestly. As far as Houston, it's tough to say. He hasn't been, he's been great with fans, but he hasn't been as out there as like a Tom Bahali has or a Jamal Charles. Like Jamal Charles, he got in his new deal for the season, and word was he might hold out, but from people in his camp, they basically said it would have happened or killed him to hold out. It's tough to say whether Houston's that same kind of guy. You got to remember, he's been playing on a new CBA contract, since he came into the league. And so he's made virtually nothing for how productive he's been. And so I think this could be a situation where it's very like, no, I want my payday, because the last couple of years he's been arguably the biggest bargain in the NFL.
Right. I mean, you can't constantly give away everything for free. When you look at stuff like, for example, there's going to be a lot to answer for with both the Colts and the Seahawks when, respectively, Russell Wilson and Andrew Luck, their contracts are going to be up. And Russell Wilson before Andrew Luck, because Russell Wilson was a third round pick. I mean, and he doesn't have that 5th-year option that the Colts get to exercise. So I completely agree with where you're coming from. As a player, you have to be able to develop your brand, and then when your talent is there, people have to be able to pay for it.
Right.
You don't go to the store and pay for rotten milk. That's just not something you do. So if I'm great, I want to make my money doing so. So I get where he's coming from.
Right. And that's, I think, I don't, but that lack of payment for the first 3 years is another reason why I'm not sure. I think it's an empty rumor that the agent floated that he would sit as the season starts, because he is on the franchise tag and you're giving away almost $1 million a week. And when you barely made like 2 or 3 million over the course of your career so far, are you really going to turn that down? I don't see it. But I don't think a long-term deal is anywhere in the cards. I think he's, from the way things have been worded and stuff, and the fact that Dorsey has shown a willingness to pay for guys. He paid Sean Smith decent money. He paid a lot of free agents that came in decent money. He paid Alan Bailey. He paid Jamal Charles. He's paid guys. He paid Ron Parker. So it would seem as though an offer has very likely been made. But if I'm Justin Houston, he's never going to have higher value than he does right now. He just came off a season, where he was mauling people. And
most sacks, right? Most sacks in the league.
Yep, most sacks in the league. He was half a sack shy of
the record.
Yeah. He broke Derek Thomas's team record, and and he's also a monster against the run. He sets the edge better than any other outside linebacker I've watched in the NFL. And
yeah, third most tackles for loss.
Yep. He's the type of player you can legitimately build a defense around, and guys like that hitting the market, they are going to get paid. And so I'm not sure I see it happening long term. I think it almost would make more sense for the Chiefs to franchise tag him a couple of years in a row, because you're still going to pay less money. So, that one's not going to go away easy. He's just too good. I think the hope was they put the non-exclusive tag on him so other teams can make offers. I think maybe what the hope was, another team would make an offer and Houston, his agent, would maybe come down from what they were asking, seeing that the market wasn't quite as high as he thought it would be. But, who knows? Look at what Sue got paid in Miami. So obviously there's a market there for stud defensive players.
We're going to be pushing time here, so I'm actually going to do what I told you, and I'm going to poke you with a stick here. Let's go into some of the talent that's left on the team.
Right.
Lots of no-name guys there.
Right.
Can you kind of give us some insight into who are your top players that aren't the famous ones, and no one is really discussing them? Who are your breakouts going to be?
Oh man, and that's always a dangerous question, obviously. A favorite of mine is the guy that I'd referenced earlier when talking about replacing Avery, Albert Wilson. He came in, he started wide receiver for the last 3 or 4 games, and we actually saw Alex Smith throwing the ball down the field to him because he got good separation down the field. He's you never know how people are going to develop one year to the next, but he moves well with the ball in his hands. He's built like a running back. He's very short but very sturdy. He's kind of like a Steve Smith build almost. Who he says is his hero. He's very fast, very quick, breaks tackles well, has good hands. When he got an opportunity last year, he played well. He's actually one reason I'm not as worried about wide receiver as a lot of people are. Another guy to keep an eye on is on defense, Phillip Gaines, who was a rookie last year and kind of got forced into playing time due to injuries, and he played really well at corner as the season went on. He's very, very lanky, very long arms, great hips, mirrors really well, and just he's got boards for hands. He can't catch a thing, but he's someone that they could keep an eye, that people should keep an eye on, because when he played, he was arguably as good or better than Sean Smith was when Gaines played. He struggled with injuries a little bit, but so he's another breakout, one guy to look at. As far as everyone else goes, keep an eye on Travis Kelce. He was very good last year. I think he's got potential to be a superstar.
The way that he plays, the physicality he uses, he could kind of be another comparable Rob Gronkowski, the way he plays.
Right.
Easily. I don't think he really has the size, but just in the tenacity that he has.
Yeah, and Kelsey's 6'5", 265, so he's almost up there with him. Their play style's a little different. He doesn't have the brute force, but he's slick. He kind of moves like a receiver almost when he gets the ball. He's slick, and so it's a little bit different running styles. But I think they do have some similarities, and they both just play with brute force when they're blocking, and they're tough to bring down. If you're a 205-pound corner, how are you going to tackle that guy?
Right, exactly. Let's get a little bit of scheme here.
Sure.
One thing that Kyle and I like to rip on last year a little bit when it came to the Chiefs was no touchdowns to wide receivers. That was a big talking point. So, and we brought it up all the time.
Wait, the Chiefs receivers didn't have any touchdowns? What? This is brand new information. No. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. By all means,
Yeah.
What is the actual scheme here? Is this a West Coast? Is it a run primary? We all know that Andy Reid is a West Coast coach. What is the actual plan, I guess, on offense?
The scheme changed as the year went along. What ended up happening, well, for one, the Titans disaster of a game, they kept chucking it downfield. I have no idea what they were doing there. What they ended up doing early on in the year, they were running a lot of 2 and 3 tight end sets and kind of going with kind of a bit of a power run game, which fans were thrilled by because Jamal Charles and Niall Davis were seeing the majority of the ball. As the year went along, I'd mentioned earlier that offensive guard was a gigantic problem. The Chiefs' interior offensive line really struggled to pass block, and you could see it affecting what Reid was play calling. They went from a straight West Coast offense to more often running. I'm assuming you said you coached, so you know what package plays are like at the college level and stuff. You've got
right.
1, 2, 3 reads, and it goes, together as a package. They ran a ton of plays like that last year, especially using DeAnthony Thomas, who is just, there's another guy to keep an eye on. That guy's a fireball. Holy cow. They ran a ton of plays like that because they couldn't count on the offensive line to pass block for longer than about 1.5 to 2 seconds. And so they went from a straight West Coast offense to almost more of a gimmicky college type offense. And that was because of weaknesses in the roster. When your offensive line is just completely outmatched, it just destroys everything you're trying to do. So I think you're going to see a return to probably more traditional Andy Reid stuff in the upcoming season. Hopefully, if they address the offensive line a little bit more. So the scheme that was run, it was like a hybrid of West Coast principles along with almost a college offense with a ton of package plays thrown in there. And I really do think it was largely Reid trying to scheme around some basic weaknesses in the roster. And as far as the no wide receivers touchdown, it took like a couple of acts of God for that to happen. Dwayne Bowe fumbled at the 1 yard line. And it was just like, and people just started laughing. Earlier in the year, we had a wide receiver that like had a straight shot to the end zone, and he just stepped out of bounds for like no reason. It was a really weird year. It was clearly destined though that the Chiefs were not to have any wide receiver touchdowns.
Yeah, we definitely loved ripping on him for it. And it wasn't because we didn't think that they were good. It was just astounding. Like at one point we were just like, we're not even mad, we're impressed. It was like eating a whole wheel of cheese. I mean,
yeah, you ate a whole wheel of cheese? Yeah, no, it was amazing. It was amazing to watch.
So you brought up the offensive line needs. That's obviously the number one thing that everybody talks about when they talk about what the Chiefs need for the draft. Wide receiver, defensive back. I'm not so much sold on defensive back. I think that's kind of a secondary concern at this point. But getting that franchise wide receiver now, Macklin's not that guy. I think we all know that. He's a system guy. He's going to be great in that system, but he's not a number one guy, to me at least. Okay. You're looking for that number one. You guys need a big time receiver that when Alex Smith throws that fade route, he knows that's going to be caught. So how do you see them attacking the draft? And also, who are the logical, and I'm using finger quotes here, fans clamoring for?
The logical fans. Well, recently I've been doing an entire series on, I call it Know Your Draft Crush. I've been looking at the various wide receivers that are available. In a dream world, Kevin White or Amari Cooper fall to the Chiefs. That's not going to happen. They're both going to be gone by 18. A lot of fans are clamoring for Devontae Parker. Just basically, like you said, wide receiver. People they're hammering on that. The big problem with wide receiver for the Chiefs is, like we talked about, Alex Smith is a unique quarterback. You can't draft a guy who wins at the catch point, but doesn't create great separation, because Smith will not throw contested passes. He's been in the league long enough now to where it's time to just call a spade, and Alex Smith does not throw contested passes. So a guy like a Jalen Strong, or that kind of guy who wins at the catch point, but doesn't get great separation, you can just cross him off the list as logical picks. And that's one reason Dwayne both struggled with him. Players that win at the catch point but don't get separation, they don't succeed without Smith. And that's why Macklin's such a better fit. Wide receiver wise, I think a lot of Kansas City Chiefs fans really want to see Tyler Lockett, but I can't tell whether that's because there's a lot of K-State, there's a lot of crossover there. There's a lot of K-State fans and a lot of Chiefs fans. But basically what you have a lot of people looking at would be an inside linebacker in round 1, probably Kendricks if he falls. And then in round 2, address wide receiver. And from there on out, look at offensive line pieces. I kind of flip that around. I'd like to see them go offensive line round 1, maybe Irving from Florida State. And then in round 2, this wide receiver group is so insanely deep that they could go wide receiver in rounds 2 or 3 and still pick up a guy who maybe he's not, quite that number 1 stud that you may be looking for. But I'll take a wide receiver group with 3 very good wide receivers any day, to where you can just kind of pick your poison on any given play.
Right. I mean, when you're looking, you nailed it right on the head. Everybody has said the same thing, which is, there's just so many wide receivers out there that it shouldn't be your main concern going into the draft. Like for you, offensive line, with how many good offensive linemen there also are, but they're much more limited. So that's why you would roll for one of them.
Absolutely. And then you can rounds 2, 3, and even 4. You got guys like Tyler Lockett and Phillip Dorsett, and Devin Smith, Nelson Aguilar. They might legitimately drop to the 3rd or 4th round, and those guys can play. And so, you got unusually, like last year was really a really strong crop. This year might be even deeper. Maybe not quite as top heavy. Like, I don't think you've got anyone that's as good as Beckham or Watkins, but I think they're even deeper. So you can go there in the 3rd or 4th round and still get a very productive player.
Also, I have to bring this up. I had seen that an article was written on Arrowhead Pride, and they were talking about a defensive lineman, 6'7", from Iowa State. And I want to plug my hometown, because that's where I'm from, is Iowa, and Iowa State's my football team of choice. And then those guys are awful for the most part, and it's not because they play bad, it's just because of the cards they're dealt with the people in their Big 12 North and everything. So let's go ahead and we have about 6 minutes left here. Okay. Let's get into what you expect for next year. What is the expectation? What is the expected record? And I know that it's early, so it's tough to really pinpoint that. But is this a team that is a playoff / Super Bowl contender? And if not, how long should the fans be willing to wait for that? Right. How long should it take for that? And how much hope is there really for next year?
Okay. Well, what I'll do is, I'm going to take health out of the equation, because, Jamal Charles gets hurt, the season's essentially over. So taking health out of the equation, the Chiefs this next season, there's absolutely no reason they should not be in the playoffs, and they shouldn't be able to make a little bit of noise in the playoffs at the very least. Like I was talking about with the Patriots and the Seahawks, they showed last year they can beat very good teams and do so very convincingly. They pounded the Patriots. They beat the Seahawks at their own game. This is a team that has no excuse to not compete, particularly if Derek Johnson comes back healthy and shores up the biggest problem on defense, which was runs right up the middle, because we had no inside linebackers that could stop the run. The expectations should be anything less than 10 wins would be a pretty big underachievement, in my opinion. When you look at how the roster is built right now. And I think you see the Dorsey and Reed reflecting that by the trade for Ben Grubbs. You don't trade for Ben Grubbs because you're trying to compete in 3 years. You trade for Ben Grubbs because you think you're ready to do something. So for me, anything less than 10 wins would be a massive disappointment, barring, a ton of guys get injured or whatever. This is a team that really should compete. They run the ball very well. They've got a very good pass defense, which in today's NFL is the ticket. Anything less than the playoffs would be a disappointment. Now, as far as predicting any kind of playoff win, well, this is the Chiefs, and they don't win playoff games in my lifetime. So, that's kind of a maybe. But that's the expectation by fans, is they should be in the playoffs this year, and they should at the very least look like they belong there.
All right. Well, hey, we are pushing up against time, so let's go ahead and wrap this up. I want to turn the floor over for you. Plug yourself, plug the website, and kind of tell everybody where they can go to follow you.
Oh, sure. Well, as mentioned, I write for Arrowhead Pride, which is one of the largest Chiefs sites out there. And in my opinion, obviously, it's the best. It's just arrowheadpride.com. A lot of people that are Chiefs fans are going to have heard of it. It's a fantastic site. A lot of great content that comes out every day. Joel, the guy who runs the site, just grinds. As far as I'm concerned, you can follow me on Twitter if you want. I'm at RealMNchiefsfan, because someone created a fake Twitter account. So I'm the real Minnesota Chiefs fan, not the pretend one. As far as plugging goes, that's it. Arrowhead Pride is a fantastic site. Not one of the best place if you want to read about or talk about the Chiefs. That is the place to go. And as far as me, I'm on Twitter. I occasionally say things that will either amuse or enrage you. And either way, it's entertaining. So there you go.
Well, there you have it, everybody. That is Seth Keysor, who is an editor for Arrowhead Pride. He is great. Thank you so much, Seth, for coming on and being with us today. We really appreciate that.
That was a blast. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. We're definitely going to get you back on. All right. Come draft time, we're going to need reactions from you, whether it be, you throwing your beer across the room at your television, or, if I have to put the explicit tag on it, I will.
Sure. I think that usually after the draft, that makes a lot of sense.
So we definitely are going to be excited to get you back. I know that next time Kyle will be here, and he won't be, slathered up in Vicks like he's about to take on a sumo wrestler or something. But
well, I don't know. He's a Colts fan, so if we could just be you and me again, I think we'd be okay.
That's good. I can't wait for him to hear that too.
Oh, good.
Well, thank you so much. Hey, we've got to cap this off. So for everybody from Arrowhead Pride, go ahead and check out the show. Support Seth here. He deserves it. He works hard. He's a great writer. Check him out. Thank you, Seth.
Yep, thank you.
Once again, that was Seth Keysor, editor for Arrowhead Pride. Great guy. Can't wait to have him back on after the draft. He's going to be providing insight that just none of us could actually ever even think about having. If you're joining us from Arrowhead Pride for the first time, make sure you check out our show, footballisamerica.com. You can check out all the shows there, also on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, TuneIn. We're on just about every podcasting medium that you can think of. We're there. We're all over the place. Support our show. Go to the website and comment. You can leave comments right on individual shows. You can just email us if you'd like. Tell us how good or bad we're doing. Tell us if you think Seth should be back anytime soon. Also get us on Twitter at FBIA Podcast, Facebook.com/FootballIsAmerica Podcast. We're here for you. We like to give you a little bit different spin on what we think football should be about. Check us out. Leave your comments. Tell us how we're doing. Thank you for joining us. We hope to have you back.